Hello. In today's presentation, we will discuss password cracking. In the presentation, we will talk about background of passwords and the start of password cracking, prevention of having your password cracked by a hacker, tools in which both law enforcement and criminals can use to crack passwords, the ways in which those tools crack passwords. Then we will get into the legal side of laws regarding password cracking and incidents of cases involving password cracking. And then finally, we will discuss a brief summary of all the mentioned topics at the end. To begin, we will discuss what a password is. A word or string of characters used for user authentication to prove identity or access approval to gain access to a resource, which should be kept secret from those not allowed access. The use of passwords is known to be ancient. Sentries would challenge those wishing to enter an area to supply a password and would only allow a person or group to pass if they knew the password. In modern times, usernames and passwords are commonly used by people during a login process that controls access to protected computer operating systems, mobile phones, cable TV decoders, automated teller machines, etc. A typical computer user has passwords for many purposes: logging into accounts, retrieving email, accessing applications, databases, networks, websites, and even reading the morning newspaper online. In cryptanalysis and computer security, password cracking is the process of recovering passwords from data that have been stored in or transmitted by a computer system. Crack was one of the first password cracking software tools and began in 1990 when Alec Muffet, a Unix system administrator, created the Unix password cracking program designed to allow its system administrators to locate users who may have weak passwords. Crack was the first standalone password cracker for Unix systems and later the first to introduce programmable dictionary generation. A very important part of having a password is making sure you take all necessary precautions to avoid a hacker from being able to guess it. It is best to avoid simple passwords such as all letters or all numbers, and instead a combination of letters, numbers, and even symbols. Another way to ensure your password protected is to have multiple sources of authentication, like discussed in the authentication lesson in class. These three factors can include the ownership factor, which is something the user has, the knowledge factor, which is something the user knows, and the inherence factor, which is something the user is or does. Here is an example of how Google uses two-factor authentication. Whenever you sign into Google, you'll enter your username and your password as usual. Then you enter a code from your phone, because you'll be asked for a code that will be sent to you via text, voice call, or on the mobile app. And then your account has additional protection against hijackers. This ensures that your password is protected and that no hacker can get in. When choosing a password, consider these tips to make a strong password. It should not contain the user's name, it should be 6 characters long or longer, and should contain letters, numbers, and symbols as shown in this table. Here is a link to see whether your current password is strong, or try a potential password and see how quick it can be cracked. There are special tools sold in order to crack passwords as well, available to both the public and law enforcement. The company Access Data makes FTK, or Forensic Toolkit, a forensic analysis tool that is used for computer investigations. In class, we discussed how FTK allows an investigator to look into every aspect of a computer hard drive. In examining the hard drive, they may look into the size of files, view images, and do keyword searches to find evidence. The Access Data Password Recovery Toolkit, or PRTK, and Distributed Network Attack, or DNA, is similar to FTK but is password cracking specific. Both these programs are intended for law enforcement officials, corporate security, and/or IT professionals who need access to password-protected files, folders, and computers. Both programs analyze file signatures to find encryption types and determine which recovery modules to use. Before recovering passwords for protected files, PRTK and DNA create hash values that can be used to aid in determining whether the content of a file changed during the password recovery. These tools perform recoveries on protected files using various methods, including decryption and dictionary attacks. The key features of both password cracking tools include recovering passwords, hash files, open encrypted files, generate reports, and utilize graphic processing units. A password cracking tool that is free and labeled one of the best known tools is John the Ripper. John the Ripper was created by open source software for the purpose of cracking passwords on the Unix operating system. Now the tool can work on several different platforms and is available to anyone. The program combines a number of password crackers into one package, auto-detects password hash types, and includes a customizable cracker. It can be run against various encrypted password formats, including several crypt password hash types. The different kinds of attacks it can perform includes dictionary and brute force that are both described on the following slides. They are both effective and can crack passwords that can go through the tool effectively. Ways in which the software is so effective is by the way it cracks the password. Here are some ways to crack passwords that are not technological. Guessing is a surprisingly effective password cracking technique which involves attackers guessing likely words and phrases such as their children's names, their city of birth, and local sports teams. The attacker could also guess generic passwords like the word password, passcode, or a line on the keyboard, for example, QWERTY. Another way is social engineering, which is a non-technical way of retrieving a password using human interaction to manipulate people into sharing information. This technique could also involve attackers tricking people into breaking normal security procedures to retrieve passwords. If done by law enforcement, social engineering could include asking for a password and then revealing it during an interrogation. This specific technique could also be as simple as finding the password in plain sight at a scene for investigators. The ways in which the software mentioned before works is through these techniques of cracking passwords. Online dictionary attack is a technique that includes an attacker using an automated program that includes a text file of words. The program repeatedly attempts to log on to the target system using a different word from the text file on each try. The offline dictionary attack is similar to the online dictionary attack, where the attacker gets a copy of the file where the hashed or encrypted copy of user accounts and passwords are stored, and uses an automated program to determine what the password is for each account. This type of attack can be completed quickly once the attacker has managed to get a copy of the password file. There is also the brute force attack, which is a variation of the dictionary attacks, but is designed to determine passwords that may not be included in the text file used in those attacks. Although a brute force attack can be attempted online due to network bandwidth and latency, they are usually undertaken offline using a copy of the target system's password file. In a brute force attack, the attacker uses an automated program that generates hashes or encrypted values for all possible passwords and compares them to the values in the password file. Lastly, there is a password sniffing, which is a technique that reveals a number of passwords by monitoring traffic on a network to pull out information. Attackers can examine individual packets of data to pull out ones that look like they may contain passwords. In certain cases, the passwords are displayed in plain text inside the system, rather than encrypted, making it very easy for the password sniffer to identify them and match them with their username to gain access to password-protected information. Now we will discuss laws regarding password cracking. The Fourth Amendment directly deals with privacy and its relation to search and seizure. It requires that law enforcement have, in most cases, a warrant in order to search a premise or take someone's property. In the case of a password-protected device, an investigator is allowed to search a phone and attempt to crack the password during a search and seize event without a warrant. This is because password protecting a phone is equivalent to locking a closed container, as talked about in class, and lower courts have upheld the searches of closed containers. The search must be done contemporaneous with the search, meaning that the attempts to break the password must not be timely. There is also a drawback of if the phone will erase all contents if the wrong password is entered. The investigator cannot try to unlock the password-protected phone if unlocking the password is a threat to the contents of the phone. The Fifth Amendment essentially deals with the protection of people from self-criminalization. In addition to being able to try to crack a password and not break the Fourth Amendment, the question is whether or not law enforcement can ask for a password without breaking the Fifth Amendment. If an officer requests for the password and the person complies, there is no issue with the Fifth Amendment. If the officer demands for the password and puts the criminal in a situation where they feel they must give the password, they can put up an argument, but the likelihood of it being strong in court is very low. With the new technology in today's age, however, there is a huge twist to this right. If the cell phone is password protected but can be unlocked with biometric scanning, there is no Fifth Amendment issue. This is an example of the law not being able to keep up with the rapid changing of technology today. A law that is 225 years old puts up a tough fight with technology that is advancing every year. In addition, most of the laws regarding password cracking includes the penalty of a hacker who cracked a password and broke the law. These crimes a criminal does through password cracking can result in punishment not necessarily associated with hacking. For example, hacking by password cracking could be done to commit identity theft or larceny, and would be punished under those generally applicable crimes. The following cases involve incidents where password cracking was faced with the issue of decryption in the Fifth Amendment. The cases are all lower court decisions that include both rulings of decryption being privileged and unprivileged. In the 2012 case, U.S. v. Doe, the 11th Circuit issued the first published appellate decision in the United States in federal or state court to hold that decryption is a privileged testimonial act. The case involved Doe, a man who was believed to be in possession of child pornography, but his files were encrypted and he refused to decrypt once in custody. The government seized his hard drives, believing they contained child pornography, but they could not be decrypted since Doe invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. This meaning he refused to self-incriminate himself, knowing that what could be found once the files were decrypted could place him in jail. Another part of this case was the fact that the government could not identify with reasonable particularity the existence of certain files. Since this was true, the suspect could not be compelled to disclose the existence of incriminating documents which the government was unable to describe with reasonable particularity, because such disclosure was a statement the documents existed and which is not true. An example of a case with not privileged decryption is the 2012 case U.S. v. Frisco. A federal district court judge ordered a Colorado defendant, Frisco, accused of bank fraud, to decrypt files on a computer seized pursuant to a warrant. The judge made the decision because there was plenty of evidence to prove Frisco was guilty. This is because of a jailhouse recording of the defendant explaining how the laptop contains information the authorities were seeking. The prosecution in this case argued that if the court did not rule against Frisco, it would make it seem as though encrypting anything will allow criminals from being caught and be leeway for all potential criminals. These cases bring up the point that there is a split in whether or not decryption is privileged, and this could be a huge issue. Author Dan Terzian, in his article, The Fifth Amendment, Encryption in the Forgotten State Interest, argues that decryption and computer passwords do not fit the oversimplified safe combination lockbox key dichotomy used by the 11th Circuit. Instead, the advanced technology and evolving questions about decryption is more aptly decided by balancing government and individual interests within the amendment's doctrinal framework. This points out the age of the laws the courts are trying to follow and how they do not necessarily catch up with today's technological standards. Courts are deciding different outcomes on similar cases, and that is evident amongst the previous cases that are explained. Something has to be done to ensure that there is no split in whether or not decryption is privileged, and this can only be done by updating laws regarding the issue. For more information on these cases, click the following link at the bottom of the slide. In this presentation, we touched upon the fact that weak passwords put you at risk, so it's important to have a strong and secure password for everything you must password protect. A strong password is made up of a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, and that is what will keep you from risk of hacking. Authentication is also a very good tool to keep your accounts secure, by making sure you have an alternative way to log into a password-protected account. The different types of tools to crack passwords were discussed, including Password Recovery Toolkit, Distributed Network Attack, and John the Ripper. As well as laws regarding password cracking were discussed, along with cases that included decryption and issues with the Fifth Amendment. The final point made in this presentation was that law must keep up with the technology of today's age, or further issues with law enforcement will ensue. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.